Welcome, everyone. Reminder to please subscribe, like, comment, and share to help the algorithm bring it to more people, which changes their lives and brings Mashiach. And 2 disclaimers. Number 1, this channel's catered to a Chabad crowd, or at least religiously Jewish. The second disclaimer is that this channel is to change lives, not to bash anyone. So without further ado, we have over here Reb Refael, or Bobby Plax, who has a master in psychology, and which is an incredible, amazing degree, and good for you for having it. So let's talk about psychology. I'm excited.
Yeah, psychology is originally I was in economics, and then I was studying a lot of philosophy at the time. And one of my friends had I was studying Manchester Meeting. If you've ever read that book, phenomenal, highly recommend. It's by Victor Frenkel. Actually, a story with the Rebbe. Anyways, so Victor Frenkel survived the Holocaust, and basically Man's Search for Meaning is about how he found meaning, the will to survive throughout the concentration camps. It's a fascinating book, and he pretty much creates his entire thesis and philosophy of psychology through his experience of going through the concentration camps.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so I was in economics, second year student. Actually flunked out of economics. I'm trying to get back into it. So whatever. Anyways, figured that's
you don't want to get into that.
Well, no, I'm just saying like, let's just say like I did a lot of partying and not a lot of studying. So
okay, that's typical,
right? Yeah. Anyways, so I'm trying to get back into economics, but I'm really liking this philosophy situation. And all of a sudden, my friend just has like a crisis, starts panicking, has like a full blown like panic attack, and trying to figure out what's going on. And I was like, Luke, like, what's going on? Talk to me, buddy. And so as he's talking to me, I'm realizing he's having an existential crisis. And I was like, whoa, like, I'm like, Luke, like, you're having an existential crisis. And just for background, he was in firefighting school, or he was going to get into firefighting school, or he was trying to do this and trying to do that. He was nish there, nish then. Like, he was like, all of us, we were kind of in university, even though like, we're still not sure what we're going to do with our lives, but he really didn't know what he was going to do with his life. And it was the time where you have to like at least get the ball rolling. Mm-hmm. So after that moment, so I helped him work through it. And after that moment, I was like, that's it. I dropped out of economics. I enrolled in psychology in my second year. And that finished my bachelor's in psychology.
Because of him.
Because of that one case. And and so I didn't look back ever since. So finished my bachelor's in psychology. Then right after that, I got an offer to do my master's in cognitive. So it's generally speaking psychology, mm-hmm. but it's master's in science in cognitive neuroscience, cognitive mm-hmm. behavioral neuroscience, where I ended up researching attention, and specifically attention in touch, and which I don't know if you want to get into, but it gets into a whole slew of now what my thinking is this really interesting phenomenon of how attention works today and how we're also kind of distracted.
Oh my goodness, yes. So is it because of our behavior or just because of our genetics? What did they say?
Why we're so distracted?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, all of us have a nice device on our phone.
So it is, yeah, it is that.
So yeah, right. It's that, but it's also a lot. It's also a lot of everything. It's like this mm-hmm. crazy storm that happened, right? Advertising. As soon as the television came out, who funded the television? Advertising in all North America, right? So this was the first major distraction. People are now distracted from real conversations like this to conversations on the TV where they can't be a part of it, and now they're just taking in information. And the second thing is this.
What's the problem with that?
What's the problem with that? The problem with that is, first of all, the way that advertising works, as I'm sure everyone knows, when you start talking about something, like we were just talking about microphones, and then mm-hmm. you got an ad for a microphone, right? Oh, coincidentally.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Well, no, now it's a bit more sophisticated. But back when TV just came out, they started advertising TV shows. So the TV shows that were funded by a specific corporation to sell a specific product, and that product was related in ways and in part to the TV show itself. So whether the character was wearing a watch or maybe if they're selling stoves, then there's like a woman cooking in the show, whatever. There's like various things, but it's loosely related to what is being advertised or directly related to what is being advertised. It's not necessarily a problem in the grand scheme of things, but if you look back at the way, generally speaking, cultures learned about things, learned about roles, learned about gender roles, learned about their roles in society, learned about their roles in different ages, right? They learned about it through stories. We know in the Torah, right? When people did certain things, we learn about who we are from stories. The difference is when you're trying to reach a vast public, which has in Canada here, right? We have,
and everyone's different.
Everyone's different. You can't give everyone the same cookie cutter narrative. But you have to start adapting and start making everyone feel the same way, feel like they're being spoken to not just feel like they're being spoken to, but to sell them products. So what you're doing is essentially crafting an identity. You're crafting an identity that it's profitable, right? So now this person is going to be a person who's going to buy Colgate toothpaste, and not, God forbid, I don't know what other brands are there, I go buy Colgate, right? But then you have, as it advances, right? Now we have social media, and now we have telephones, and now we have much more distractions. And it doesn't seem like so much, okay, fine, whatever. I'm a strong person, I have a strong power of will, but what if I'm completely distracted from the age of maturity to the point where I'm now like, okay, so like elementary school, so you're a toddler, right? You have no real sense of consciousness, sense of awareness. Now all of a sudden you're 3 or 4. You have a kind of a way, an understanding of the world. You understand that if you throw a ball into the ocean, it doesn't just magically disappear. It's still at the bottom of the ocean. It's just you can't see it anymore, right? To then understanding, okay, well, I have a consciousness. I kind of likes and I have kind of dislikes. And then when you're an adolescent, now you're like, oh, there's a world, and they see me, and now I have to be self-conscious of myself in the world to make sure that I don't look like a crazy person, and I'm socially acceptable, right? So now I'm accepted, and I also in that time period have to make decisions to figure out who I am for the long term. Meaning, I have to say, okay, this is what I value in my life, and this is what I want to carry on forward with. So if I'm doing that, right? If I'm doing that actively, that means I'm testing limits. Teenagers rebel. I'm testing limits. I'm breaking. Kids break things. Why? Because they want to see what can it withstand. They're testing limits not to see what they can break or destroy in terms of the home and the setting and the rules and the parenting. No, they're just trying to see, okay, really, like, how, like, where's the gray area and where's like hard no. This is off the edge. This is like socially discouraging and also bad for you. So if a kid, now this is tangential, but if a kid grows up with no structure like that, they're very ambivalent, they're very anxious, they're very fearful, and because they don't really know the limits of life. They don't really know, because the limits keep you safe to an extent. Now we have a little bit too much.
Do they do this consciously?
The parents?
No, the kids.
The kids, no.
And the teenagers?
The teenagers, well, once you've grown up like that, so this is more of like kind of like an automatic. This is
everything that psychology is teaching you to get a degree.
This is partly things that I'm piecing together from, because on a general level, what they're teaching you is like, okay, on developmental psych, this is like, okay, so object permanence. Object permanence is a time where kids now understand that, as I said, like you throw a ball into the water, it doesn't disappear, right? If your kid is playing with something and you take it away, they're like, oh, it just disappeared and then vanished. So object permanence is a milestone of consciousness that you now understand that things exist permanently in the world regardless if you don't see them.
Kids think that not that way?
Yeah.
What's the consequence? Like, what?
The consequence is that things have value, that things have significance, and they don't just run away, right? And then there's a level. What
about
of that.
Spiritually?
So there's a level of that, which is they call it myopia of youth, which is that like these teenagers do dumb things, like they drive drunk, they'll speed, going crazy, whatever, like things that are, as an adult, you're like, that's dangerous.
What about teenagers that don't do that? Are they not healthy, or just like?
But there's ways of doing that. So what that means is, so this idea of this myopic outlook is that there's no. I can live forever. So and a small version of that is I can just do nothing for my whole life, and I'm still going to remain young, and then eventually I'll get my act together, and then but then all of a sudden 10 years pass you by, and then you're like, wait, how come I didn't do anything? Because in that time you think you're going to be young forever. But the advantage of that, thinking you're going to be young forever and invincible, is that now you can go take risks, find new experiences, engage in the world in a way that you have a stake in it because you know things exist in the world and they don't really change, and you're going to go out in the world and succeed because there's no failure in your mind because you're going to win, right? Because you're youth and you have the energy and the value and the right. So the advantage of that is that you have this kind of like fearless thinking, and so this gives you a boost when you're going to go into finding yourself as yourself, which is what we were talking about, right? So when you go into this way of developing your identity, right, by taking risks, by experiencing new things, trying new things, right, and and also within the realm of social acceptability. So some things aren't you.
Aristotle became the tikkun.
What?
The Aristotle, you heard of that before?
No.
Became the tikkun, which the lights of Toh and the vessels of tikkun. That you heard?
Yeah.
So that's what it's saying, that you should try new things in the realm of social norm.
Exactly. And even if they're not in the realm of social norms, because sometimes you understand social norms are just structures like on a bowling lane, right? Like if you don't if you don't
you have to stretch a little out of the social norm.
Yeah,
a little more and more.
So there's social norms, and they kind of like, for better or worse, just kind of give us like a very loose definition of this is acceptable, this is not acceptable, this is kind of how you're likable, this is kind of how you're not likable. Okay, but let's say like people like people who do cool stuff. So is it okay if I lie? It was like, no, it's not okay, especially if you're pathologically a liar. That's not okay. So then you understand that that's bad. But is it cool and to start a company that's trying out new things, even though everyone says it's going to fail? At the time, it's going to be like, okay, people are saying it's like not a good thing.
No, it's not
right?
Cool at all.
But then once you're successful, it's like, oh, all of a sudden that is cool.
Yeah.
So the point is like there is these social norms. There is things that are expected from you. But then there's people who kind of teeter at the edge of that, who are the ones who are really pushing the limits. But they also understand how social norms work, and they understand what society expects of them, and they also understand how to work within the between the lines, so to speak. Saying like, I can go outside, I can have one foot in the chaos, and I can be okay in the chaos. Whereas like some people, if there is no order, there is absolutely chaos, and they can't live in that chaos.
Mm-hmm.
So we rely on such people to give us our innovations, like Elon Musk, to live in a world of chaos, and chaos is creativity at the same time, because it's unordered potential. Ordered potential is now what we have, right? We have a table, it's structured, but everything else, if it's just parts, right? And it might be a little bit like, okay, how do I get this table together? Or I don't even need to see a table there. Where somebody's like, oh, there's a table. There's a thing in psychology. There's a test to test openness. Openness is a character trait that allows one to be, or kind of is indicative of one's ability to be open to new things, and to as well be more creative. Kind of indicates creativity. One such way we kind of test this is a multiple use test. I forget, I don't know if that's exactly what it's called. Alternative use test. So it's something like you take a shoe. Like, what can you use this for? Like, think of ways to use a shoe.
Well, besides for the normal way, obviously, to kill a fly.
Kill a fly, yeah, as a hammer. If you're starving, like whatever, you don't have a plate, you can use it or whatever, like to drink out of it.
Mm-hmm.
You could do like a bunch of stuff, right? And the more kind of ways that you can think of how to use something alternatively relates directly to how open one is. So the more open one is, and this is right. So, anyways, that's all about that. But coming back to this idea of developing identity, is that all that happens within the realm of our development. As we develop in life, right? We have different milestones of conscious development. We first know the world exists. We know what's permanent. We know that we're a conscious being. Then we know that society knows that we exist, and we also have to figure out ourselves in that time through our experiences. And that allows us to then gain insight by virtue of our experience as to what it is that I like, what it is that I am, who I am, what I am, where's my potential at, right? because nobody gives you a card from birth saying you're going to be a astronaut. It's not what happens. So that all happens. That's all things that must happen in order for you to develop well. But if you're distracted from your development, you're not trying new things. You're only searching things that are comfortable and release dopamine, such as scrolling on Facebook or Instagram or YouTube, going or playing Fortnite or all these things. So you're not really engaging in the world in a meaningful way that allows the real you to emerge and for you to see the real you. So as a result,
what is the real you?
So the real you, so obviously it's potential, right? We know like there's the ratzon, right?
How can someone say like something like the real me is someone who plays Fortnite?
Why can't someone play the real me, someone who plays Fortnite? Well, there are people who are really good at Fortnite, and that's fine. I'm not bashing it. What I am saying is there's a multitude of experiences and a multitude of things. You can't say I only like macaroni and cheese.
Right.
That's
there are many parts of you.
There was a story, a short story by Franz Kafka. He wrote Jewish guy actually, and he wrote many books called The Trial. And his way of writing was generally referred to as kind of Kafka-esque, which is like if you ever are on the phone with like Rogers or any of these like bureaucratic agencies, and they're like, well, you have to transfer you to this department, you have to transfer to this department, and you're like, what the heck is going on here? I just want to talk to somebody to get my internet fixed. Whatever. It's kind of like this crazy dream. But the story is about this guy who could fast. He was just really good at fasting. And he would fast for a week, and then he would fast for 2 weeks, and then he would fast, and then slowly his circus act of fasting became kind of like people didn't really care. So then he decided, I'm going to do the greatest fast yet. I'm going to fast for like 2 months or something crazy. It's obviously a fictional story.
Water fast. Oh,
just he's locked in a cage, and he's fasting for however long he said, right? And slowly people are forgetting about him. And he's at the corner of like some circus where like whatever the main attraction is, like maybe an elephant, but he's still there fasting. And then finally he's dying, and one person like kind of hears him. He says, I just want to say, like, I don't fast because I'm good at it. I just never found anything I like to eat.
Wow.
Right? So it's kind of the same thing here. It's like, well, I'm avoiding doing something. I'm avoiding living my life to the fullest because I'm distracting myself with Fortnite. Well, and okay, fine, maybe Fortnite is your thing, but maybe also like you can extend that, you can expand that, you can grow that into something else that is really you. Because Fortnite exists and amazing. There's amazing chess players, but and somebody who is an amazing chess player, their life is also fully about chess. But there's a multitude of experiences that you could have and that you should have to then really refine and feel yourself as who you are. And so the point I'm making is that if we don't do this, and this is what's happening today, is that as a teacher of kids, I see that they don't engage in experiences so often. And the newer studies coming out, specifically Jean Twenge, she wrote a book called Why iGen. It's called iGen. And she essentially showed that kids today are getting their driver's license way either not at all or way later. They are going out with friends less. They're spending more time at home, more time with family. They are feeling less happy. They're feeling like they can't do anything more often. Their suicide is coming at 14 now, suicidal ideation, which is crazy, right? That's about the age, 13, as we know, bar mitzvah, right? That's about that age where you become an adolescent. You now are aware of the social pressures that are expected of you as a person. Right, so that's happening more often. People, they're feeling like they can't do anything right, like they're not good for anything, like they have no self-confidence. And all this change, granted, there's a correlational data, meaning it's correlated to something, and the correlation is that as soon as in 2017, 2010, maybe. Smartphone ownership crossed 50% in America. Now almost every single person has a smartphone. And everybody has TikTok, everybody has Instagram, everybody has YouTube. And there's good stuff that you can find on there. But if you're spending every minute of your day on there, and it's addicting to spend it all, and at that time where you should be, as we were saying, there's a real kind of, for lack of a better term, evolutionary kind of prompt. I don't know, Hashem created us, obviously, but there's a propelling by virtue of our biological, physiological, psychological makeup to say, form yourself, find yourself, create yourself. The same way a baby has to crawl, the same way a baby, not necessarily crawl, but a baby has to learn to move their limbs, right? Then they have to kind of see their limbs to say, okay, well, this is my hand. And then an exact change in the world. It's like, oh, I caused that to happen. It's like, and then speech, and then consequence, and so on and so forth. So they learn their body. So the same way, if you stop and you take a pause and you don't form yourself in terms of identity, in terms of personality, and use your personality, which is inherent within you, to then come out through experience and change, then you're left
unfinished. Is there a time when this development stops?
It kind of happens forever, but there's different. So
because I'm asking that, because this seems to be, especially in a non-Jewish world, even in the Jewish world, Havdil, that like when you become an adult, and adult I mean like around like there's the 13, 18, 21, and 25. 25 we know when the brain fully develops, which is connected to psychology, right? So then, okay, there's nothing really actually there are certain things at 25. I think something to do with renting cars for some reason. But for all these ages, you find that like at this age they can do certain things, whereas in the younger age it's not okay. It's more of the inappropriate things. And then when you become an adult, it's okay. Why?
So one of them has to do with competence. Just generally speaking, it's like if your kid comes up to you and says, "Can I have some water?" and it's a big pitcher, likely you're going to pour it for them because you know that realistically they don't have the physical capacity to pour the water, because they're going to spill it. So you're going to say, oh, let me pour it for you. You may say, hold the cup. And this is called zones of proximal development, where it was a Russian psychologist, and his name escapes me. It's been a while since I've been in university, but anyways, doesn't matter. The Russian psychologist, and he believed in this idea of scaffolding, right? So as a kid learns to walk, right, you're helping them. But now as they can walk, now it's an ingrained thing. And I should also mention that with this development, these things are not isolated. They, as per your question, when does it stop? It doesn't stop. These things are layered on top of each other, one after another, like a hierarchy, like a pyramid, right? So first there's walking, right? Obviously, like first there's moving your body on like getting to know yourself on a physical level, just basic motor tasks. Like if we're talking about riding a bike, when you just start riding a bike, it's very difficult, but now you can just hop on and ride and you don't really think too much about it. But as a kid, when you're as a toddler, as an infant, you're learning really, really using a lot of cognitive energy to use your hands, to use your feet, to grip things in the correct way. And we know that when we're learning new tasks, this is what happens. But as we become more proficient in that task, they become layered with it on something that's near subconscious, but it becomes layered on this hierarchy of development. What that hierarchy of development is, it's something that is akin to, it's a part of me. Now this is who I am. This experience is who I am. I know I like this. I know I don't like this. I know I can do this. I know I can't do that, because I know who I am. So I know the limits of my existence as well as the capacity for my existence. So at each stage of our existence, of us going up higher and higher in the time span, right, there's different things that we have to accomplish within ourselves. I mean, it's arbitrary to say that, but it kind of seems to be the case that that's true. And Erickson, he had something called the psychosocial stages of development, which is that at every stage there is kind of a combat. There's a combat between either for one of them, which is around age 25, which is intimacy or isolation, finding marriage or risk isolation. Higher than that is, generativity or discontentment, kind of something like that, which is that, and you see this to be true, which is that people have to have kids, or at the very least do something productive with their life so that they feel like their life is not a waste. this happens with, at that age is generally when people have like a the midlife crisis.
Mm-hmm.
It's like that. It's like, what did I do with my life? I'm gonna go buy a motorcycle and make it worthwhile. So to answer the question, basically, it never stops. It's always keeping going, but it just is more and more complex and nuanced as we age.
Mm-hmm. So there is no good reason to say why adults should be allowed to, for example, waste time on their phones or be doing inappropriate things more than kids.
Absolutely not. I think it's
so it's made up.
I think it's pretty foolish to tell your kid to get off their phone and stop watching shorts or TikToks or whatever if you yourself are doing, because it's not good for you either. We see attention.
I thought they claim they have a developed mind already. They're already developed. So you're saying they're continuing to develop. That's the argument.
So everyone's continuing to develop, and additionally, this is in the last maybe in the last maybe 2 decades, half a century of psychology, we've been seeing more and more that the brain is plastic.
What?
Yeah. So it's called neuroplasticity. And neuroplasticity is the process that our brain is not stagnant. It is not a static thing. The way I can best explain this to you is, have you ever heard of phantom limb syndrome?
No.
So phantom limb syndrome is, no one should ever know, but unfortunately there's cases where somebody had to lose a hand or a foot or something. A limb is amputated.
Oh, so now hence phantom limb.
So there are sensations of that limb. Okay, how? So let's think about, where does sensation come from? Sensation comes from the brain.
Mm-hmm.
So if we look at the brain and we say, there's allocated real estate for the hand, there's allocated real estate for the nose, there's allocated real estate for the eyes, there's allocated real estate for the feet, for every part of your body. It's called the homunculus. It's called the sensory homunculus, and it exists in the parietal lobe, just right here. And it essentially has everything in there. And interestingly, if you ever look up a picture of this, it's kind of weird. Rather, if you look up a depiction of what that would look like on a person, it's weird. You have massive hands and a massive mouth, but like very small forearms. And the explanation of the understanding for that is, how sensitive are your fingertips versus how sensitive is your forearm? Your fingertips are by far more sensitive.
Mm-hmm.
Your lips and your mouth are by far more sensitive, and that has to do with the amount of sensory receptors that are in your fingertips versus in your hand, in your forearms or your torso, right? So the higher sensitivity you have in a specific region, the greater that region actually is represented in the brain. Now, when we're talking about phantom limb syndrome, meaning there is a representation, there is an area in the brain this is your hand. Fine. Now you lose that hand. But here's the rule of neuroplasticity. The rule of neuroplasticity is, the brain is a use it or lose it system, and real estate in the brain is more expensive than in Toronto. Right? So use it or lose it system. That spot that was used for a hand that was amputated is now not getting any sensory input. No signals are coming in. Free lot. But it's still allocated for the hand. What happens is, and this was found by V.S. Ramachandran, which is that the closest bodily region that is next to that amputated limb starts taking over that spot. And so what you're actually feeling, and this can be shown, if let's say God forbid, someone's left hand is amputated, then a breeze on the cheek, an itch on the cheek or something like that will stimulate the same sensation of what that hand is. The feeling from that hand. It's not that hand. It's just that spot that you had allocated to this hand is now getting sensory signals from the closest physical living part of you. Next to that thing. So it takes over that space. So essentially what happens, so the brain consistently can change, and it does change, and we see that it does change. The more you learn to do something, that part of your brain has representations that are neuronal networks that, as you do that thing, they become more and more connected. They get more neurons. They receive signals that might be lower. This might be a little bit whatever. This is what happens. The way something happens in your brain is something called an action potential. An action potential is, so if this is a neuron, which is kind of close to it, whatever, it kind of has another one of these at the bottom, and your whole brain is like connections of these from back to front. And an action potential is when these are called the dendrites, and they receive a electrical impulse that then, when it's summed up here at this point, for the people to see, when it's summed up at this point, if it reaches above 50 millivolts, or negative 50 millivolts rather, exceeds that threshold, fire, sends the signal. But the more you learn something, the greater connections you have. That means there's more dendrites that appear, which means acts like a microphone. So now you need a lower signal to produce that action potential, that electrical impulse that then allows you to then be more efficient and produce that thing, that behavior, that thought, that understand that concept, whatever it is, whatever thing you're learning at a more efficient and faster pace. And that means you learn it. And this happens through selective attention. And when we're talking about being distracted on your smartphones and all these things, is what is happening with our brain is that we're not learning. We think we're learning. We think we're multitasking, but you're not. You're doing a lot of things very poorly, and you're not developing anything. There's a study that came out by Dr. Dimitri Christakis, which showed. So he was a pediatrician. He spent a lot of time with his child when they were born. He was on paternity leave, and he was showing them baby Einsteins.
What is that?
It's called Baby Einsteins. It's like a TV show. Anyways, he was watching. He said, and it's just a bunch of scene changes, just like rapid fire scene changes. You know, it's like there's no storyline to it. And so he wanted to see like what happens. And so he raised mice. One group of mice was raised with mouse TV, basically, which is the equivalent of how much a kid would watch of TV in that time period. Also, obviously, mice have a different cycle of life. It was all kind of made to fit, right? And one group of mice that were not raised normally for intensive purposes. However, a mice can be normal in a lab, but whatever. And what he showed was this: the mice that were raised in the TV group condition, when they were put in a Barnes maze. So a Barnes maze is basically a bunch of holes, and there's one true hole. The reason it's significant because the natural behavior of a mouse is they're scared of aerial creatures, so birds and other stuff of prey, because they swoop down and kill them. So their natural tendency is to find a place to hide very quickly and get there. So there's one true hole in which the mice can actually be there. The TV mice at the first try found this by far faster than the other group. You're like, whoa, amazing, right? But here's what, after repeated testing, the TV group found it at the same speed each time. Let's say it's 10 seconds. But the normal group found it by far and far shorter each time, meaning they were learning. The other mice were just running around like crazy, but they weren't learning anything. They were just finding it by accident. The other group was actually learning and finding it by far more efficiently, by far faster. And so this is attributable. You can say this is a representation of ADHD, and maybe that is the case. You know, there's discussions of whether it's genetic or not genetic. My thinking is that I personally believe that we can outgrow it. There's abilities.
Psychology doesn't have opinion about it if it's genetic or not.
So there is a belief that it's genetic, but there is a belief about that.
Fully, like it's not even half and half. Could you say such a thing?
It's obviously contentious. It's obviously there's debates. I mean,
so what do you believe that it could be changed?
I think there's nature and nurture. Obviously, some people are more hyperactive, and there's people that are less hyperactive.
But this only started now, especially to so many kids and so many people.
So the question is, The question is, when is your ADHD happening? When are you ADHD? Well, are you ADHD in the classroom? Well, it kind of makes sense. Being forced to sit from 9 to 5 or whatever. But 1 second. But you can watch 1,000 YouTube shorts undisturbed, not making a peep or a noise. Or you could watch a Leafs game, or you could sit down. And it's like, it doesn't seem like ADHD. It seems like you're more interested in one thing than something else.
Yeah. What's the problem with that?
There's no real problem with that. There's no real problem with that. The problem with that is over medicating and giving somebody a label that they're going to wear their whole life, and they're going to say, I'm ADHD, so therefore I can't do this and that. Wherein it might be the case that the teacher was just too lazy to deal with this kid and accurately deal with them.
So your field doesn't believe really in pills?
I'm personally against over prescribing medication. If Adderall is a for real drug that kids are taking, it is basically methamphetamine. Right. So we're villainizing people who take it illicitly, right, illegally. It's like, but you're giving your whatever age kid meth to stay focused in school.
What?
Yeah. You're giving your kid meth to stay focused in school. It's kind of absurd.
And every day.
Every day. And there's a lot of repercussions that happen with that, because it stimulates the parasympathetic nervous system, which makes you not hungry, right? So kids are growing up malnourished, right? Not tired, so now you're going to have to take another drug to go to sleep if you can't go to sleep, right? Which happens a lot. So your insomnia, right? Hyperactivity. Probably this is my own assumption, is that it does for sure hinder with sociability. So it's very important that kids find the community.
All they have. This is the best they've got.
Yeah, because nowadays we've kind of this is not how psychology should be, but how psychology currently is that there is a state of affairs. This is your mental diagnosis. This is your mental illness, and you have mental illness that's called this. So okay, 1 second. It's not like cancer. Like, it came there somehow, and even with cancer, we talk about it. It's like from smoking. It's from this. It's like all of a sudden you are cancer. No, you're not ADHD. You have ADHD, and there's ways that you can deal with it. If you know that so as we were talking about the brain being plastic, there's a phenomenal book by Norman Deutsch called The Brain That Heals Itself. I just want to check
what's the timing. Wow, we probably need to do a part 2, but we have a couple of minutes. I also want to discuss how this relates to Chabad.
Oh yeah, sorry.
So let's wrap up with the last couple of minutes. How psychology, especially in your view, how this relates to Chabad philosophy in general, and more specifically with the Chabad system. We'll probably need to make a part 2. Get a little teaser. Okay.
Sure. Well, we have this. We have this. Everything that I've been talking about that we're finding out in today's society is written in a little book called Tanya, right? We have will, right? But first, the highest level of our soul, pleasure, right? The next one, will, ratzon. Then from there, from our will, then we have our intellectual faculties, right? Then we have our emotional faculties, chesed, gvura, tiferes, netzach, hod, yisod, malchus. Malchus, then it becomes a potential that potentiates the action into the world, thought, speech, and action from malchus. There's a system in place within us that is, there is the part of me that wants pleasure, which is that it can't go anywhere. It's a very high level of pleasure. But the mechanism of how how pleasure finds itself into this world is manifested through the mechanism of will, one's will, right? So these things of what we were calling crises is, so this person desires a pleasure that is related to their soul, has a will to get it into the world. That's where it stops. There's no process in which it might reach a chokhmah level where it's just a flash of inspiration, just a flash of light, but it doesn't go further than that. It's not then refined, right? It's not then brought into das to then become one with our emotions, then be actualized into the world in a very refined and thought out way through thought, speech, and actions, through the garments of the soul, into the world. That's the crisis. But the ideal stage is where our will comes out through our Chokhmah Bina Das, through our intellectual faculties. We see the flash, right? And when we're talking about divided attention, it's like when you have Chokhmah and then you move away, it's done. You're not getting it back. Right? So selective attention, really being focused. Focused attention allows for that change, for the Bina to now start refining itself, for this cognitive growth, for these neural systems to then expand themselves, right, into something. I'm learning it. This is going to be a part of me, right? To then, right, on an intellectual level, we talk about meditation, having a love for God and a fear of God. But if you're just going around your daily life and you're not meditating, you're not thinking about these things, then it never reaches the das. It never reaches the one within our to then evoke change on an emotional level.
Mm-hmm.
So then,
I don't understand how the pleasure and will part connects to the intellectual part.
Because the pleasure is to receive pleasure. Our this is interesting because our I'm trying to find a way to phrase this, but the pleasure is in doing that which our soul, our neshama is meant to be doing, if that makes sense. So one has, like, somebody who, they really like an artist, they really take pleasure in painting a painting, whereas somebody who is more of a singer or somebody who is a mechanic, they might take really great pride in working on their skills in terms of mechanics or engineering or whatever it is. But in order to then understand, to feel that pleasure is through the mechanism of will. So that the will to find meaning, which is that I must then experience, this is who I am. I have a will to push myself. I have a will to then finish myself, or rather, you're never going to be finished, but to find myself and to actualize myself by virtue of, in order to what? Feel pleasure. And it's a feed-forward system. I get pleasure by finding the pleasure which I am personally meant to feel. But then there's the classic story, right? The classic story is, the king opens his treasure chest and he says, "Come take whatever you want." Mm-hmm. But there's a whole row of, goodies and distractions, and nobody ever makes it there except one person who blindfolded his way all the way up there, right? So we have a treasure house, which is true, real pleasure, and people talk about its flow. People talk about being really, really invested and involved in what they're doing and feeling a great pride and joy in their craft, because it's their craft, and it's not the actual finishing of the project. No, it's the project itself. It's like the reward for a mitzvah is not the reward for a mitzvah is the mitzvah itself. Mm-hmm. There's the pleasure in doing the mitzvah itself, and that's the oineg, that's the pleasure. And the will is to then manifest ourselves to then feel that pleasure. So it's like a backward forward loop. And ultimately, the way it relates to all this is that we have in this time we have a ton of distractions. We have way too many distractions, and we have to limit ourselves. And it's not okay what you're saying about parents saying, "Oh, I'm older than you. You need less screen time." It's like, no, you also need less screen time. First of all, it's bad for your eyes. It's bad for your back. It's bad for the way you think about the world, for sure. There's a syndrome called the mean world syndrome, which was Gerbner, who, when I was telling you about the whole TV situation, he's actually the one who pioneered that thinking. And his point of the mean world syndrome is people who view TV by far more see the world as more frightening, dangerous, and scary. Mm-hmm. Right? So, when
you say TV could also be on your phone.
Yes, yeah, yes.
No one who watches TV these days, like original TV.
Yeah. When you're scrolling, you see a lot of bad stuff. There's also, but like probabilistically, statistically speaking, how often does it happen that bad things are happening around you? It's like not that often. If you walk through the world and you see the world as it is, it's pretty okay. But if you turn on the news, it's like the world's burning. And right now, it's a really bad situation. But the point is I'm not of the opinion that any amount of screen time is safe. I don't know if I haven't seen any studies that show that there is benefit for sure there is benefit in terms of what we can accomplish, but on a mental health level, it doesn't seem to be the case that devices are making us happier. It seems to be the case that they're making us a lot more busy, anxious, distracted, depressed, lost, confused, and so on. But when we are engaged in Torah and we engage in Chassidus and we daven without distractions, I think it's very healthy I lock up my phone in the morning when I go to Chabad gate to daven, put it there. First of all, it charges it, so it's amazing, good for me. But for that hour, I'm me and Hashem. And I think that's a very healthy practice. We do it once a week also. We do it also Shabbos, right? That's our distraction. That's our freedom from distraction.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this practice of meditation and mindfulness, which maybe if we talk about in the part 2, this is something that I'm very keen on. It's very beneficial and should be practiced.
Yeah, amazing. That was a great ending, because also you put in a very practical application, personal, to just put away your phone for davening. That's a major changer. Yeah, so we can wrap it up now. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
And we definitely should do a part 2. Stay tuned. Chaim.